The year was 2175, and Earth was on the brink of annihilation. For years, humanity had been on edge, preparing for an invasion that many feared would come. The stars above, once a symbol of hope, were now the harbingers of doom. The Korek, a ruthless alien species, had descended upon Earth with an overwhelming force, their ships blotting out the sky like a dark tide. Their fleet consisted of colossal warships, each more advanced than anything humanity had ever seen. Within hours of their arrival, Earth's global defenses crumbled. The first wave of attacks was swift and brutal. Cities that had stood for millennia were reduced to rubble in a matter of hours. The Korek employed devastating weapons, not just of destruction, but of terror, psychotropic pulses that broke the minds of soldiers, disabling entire battalions before they could even reach the front lines. The world's military forces tried to fight back, but it was futile. The Korek weren't here for negotiation. They were here for conquest, to harvest humanity's very essence. Among the chaos, the Omega warriors were born. Created in secret under the highest levels of government and military command, these genetically enhanced soldiers were designed for a single purpose: to defend humanity from the impossible. They were the result of an experiment gone awry, a project shrouded in mystery. Each Omega warrior was imbued with the DNA of Earth's greatest fighters, enhanced with alien technology harvested from past encounters. Their bodies were stronger, faster, and more resilient than any human had ever been. But it came at a cost. The augmentation process had a high failure rate. Only a few survived the transformation, but those who did became humanity's last hope. Captain Alex Ward, once a decorated officer in the Earth Defense Forces, now stood in the rubble of what used to be New York. His body was a canvas of scars and battle-worn armor, his face hardened by years of conflict. He stood in the midst of a decimated city, the skyline once filled with towering structures, now a jagged mess of twisted steel and charred concrete. The Korek had made their move, and humanity was losing. The Omega warriors, however, had a different idea. "We won't die here," Captain Ward muttered to his team, his voice low but filled with determination. The others gathered around him, their faces a mixture of exhaustion and resolve. They were the elite, the last line of defense, and they weren't going to let Earth fall without a fight. "Ready for this, Ward?" Sergeant Leela Kincaid, one of the few surviving Omega warriors, asked. She was younger than most, but her reflexes and intellect had made her one of the most lethal soldiers in the unit. Her long black hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, and her rifle was slung over her shoulder. She eyed the horizon where the Korek ships hovered ominously. Ward nodded. "We'll give them hell." The team set out, weaving through the desolate streets, their enhanced senses allowing them to detect even the faintest signs of movement. The Korek's forces were everywhere, their armored soldiers hunting down any human they could find. The Omega warriors, however, moved like shadows, striking swiftly and disappearing into the ruins. The battle tactics they had honed in secret were now coming to fruition. They knew they had no time to waste. The Korek's superior numbers meant that if they didn't strike back now, humanity would be doomed to extinction. The Omega warriors were quick and merciless. They took down Korek patrols in small, surgical strikes, blindingly fast, using guerrilla tactics that left the invaders reeling. Ward's team hacked into the Korek's communications, scrambling their orders and sowing confusion among their ranks. One by one, the invaders began to falter, not knowing where the next strike would come from. They were used to dominating, to conquering without resistance. They were not prepared for humans who would not bow. As the sun set over the shattered remains of Earth's capital, Ward's voice crackled over the radio to the scattered human resistance forces. "We've got the momentum. This isn't over yet. We're not surrendering today. Not ever." Across the world, resistance cells joined in, emboldened by the actions of the Omega warriors. News of their success spread quickly. Humans weren't just defending. They were striking back, and they weren't going down without a fight. The Korak might have thought they had won, but they hadn't anticipated humanity's resilience, its refusal to yield. And as the night fell, the Omega warriors knew this was just the beginning. There would be more battles ahead, but for the first time since the invasion began, they felt something they hadn't in months: hope. They would not let Earth fall. They would never surrender. The origins of the Omega warriors were buried deep within the secretive military archives of Earth, lost to all but a few high-ranking officials. What began as a covert project designed to create the ultimate soldier had, over time, become a dark chapter in humanity's history. The project, known only by its codename Aegis, was the brainchild of military scientists who saw Earth's future threatened not only by external forces, but by the growing instability within human civilization itself. The Korak, however, were a threat no one had predicted. Dr. Kira Morin, one of the original project leads, was there at the beginning, a brilliant geneticist who pushed the boundaries of human biology to create the Omega warriors. Humanity's greatest strength lies in its adaptability, she had often said. But to survive the future, we must adapt faster than the world around us. The idea was simple in theory: combine the very best of human DNA with the most advanced alien technology ever discovered. Alien relics salvaged from early contact missions with races like the Shikari and the Volrath. If humans could survive, it would be because their soldiers could evolve and adapt quicker than any enemy they faced. The experiment was expensive and dangerous, and from the outset, it was fraught with failures. Out of over 300 candidates, only 30 survived the augmentation process. Their bodies became superhuman, their reflexes faster than any Olympic athlete, their minds capable of processing information and making decisions in the blink of an eye. Enhanced with adaptive armor, neural enhancements, and integrated weaponry, they were meant to be humanity's last defense against an unknown future. But the project was canceled after budget cuts and a series of deadly complications. Those who survived were left in limbo, abandoned in underground bunkers, forgotten by the world above. When the Korak invasion began, they were awoken from their forced dormancy. Alex Ward, now the leader of the Omega Warriors, had been one of the original test subjects. He had been a rising star in the Earth Defense Forces before the project, a young officer with a sharp mind and unparalleled discipline. When the call came for volunteers, he had entered the program willingly, driven by the desire to serve. The transformation had been painful, his body torn apart and rebuilt with cutting-edge technology, his mind reshaped to handle the burden of what he had become. But the end result was worth it. A warrior unlike any other, capable of feats that would be impossible for normal humans. But the sacrifices were deep. The emotional toll of the procedure left its mark on the Omega warriors, leaving them with fragmented memories, psychological scars, and the constant reminder of what they had become. For most, it was a burden they bore silently. Alex, however, was different. His connection to humanity had never been severed by the process. He remembered the world before the war, the faces of friends and family. He fought not just for survival, but for those memories. The Omega warriors were a unit forged in isolation, their true potential never realized until the invasion began. Now, as Earth was torn apart by the Korak, they finally had a purpose. "We can't wait for help," Ward said as he gathered his team in the war room of an underground bunker. The map of the world spread before them was dotted with red marks, Korak strongholds that had been set up across the globe. "Our enemies won't stop until we're wiped out. It's time to hit them hard and fast. We know where their next wave is coming from, and we'll be ready." Sergeant Leela Kincaid, always the first to speak her mind, nodded. "It's not enough to fight back. We need to cripple their infrastructure, take their supply lines and communication hubs. Without those, they're nothing more than a mob of invaders. We hit them in their hearts, and they'll be forced to retreat." The plan was set into motion. The Omega warriors would move quickly and strike without warning. Their enhanced abilities made them the perfect guerrilla force, faster and more lethal than the Korak ever anticipated. While most of humanity cowered in bunkers, the Omega warriors became legends, their swift strikes against Korak outposts leaving the invaders reeling. Every encounter was a calculated gamble, their enhanced senses guiding them through every battle with military precision. Despite their success, there was no joy in their victories. Each strike was a reminder of the destruction that had already taken place, of the countless lives lost. But with each success, the warriors began to see something that hadn't been visible in the aftermath of Earth's collapse. A glimmer of hope. The resistance was swelling. Humanity's spirit rekindled by the actions of those who refused to surrender. The Korak, who had originally dismissed humans as primitive, were now facing a force unlike any they had ever encountered. The Omega warriors' presence alone sent shockwaves through their command structure. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. And as their warriors became more determined, more organized, the Korak realized they had made a grave mistake. Ward looked out over the ruins of Earth's capital, his team standing behind him. This is just the beginning. We may be outnumbered, but we have something they'll never understand: our will to survive. And we will never surrender. And with that, the Omega warriors pressed forward, their path of vengeance and resistance just beginning. The Omega warriors had become the embodiment of humanity's defiance. Their strikes were swift, brutal, and most importantly, effective. But every victory came at a cost, and the war was far from over. As the remnants of Earth's military tried to regroup, the Korak had begun to adapt as well. They were no longer underestimating the human resistance. They were evolving, recalibrating their strategies, and fortifying their positions. It was clear. This was a war that could only be won through cleverness, ruthlessness, and most importantly, time. The Omega warriors knew the clock was ticking. Captain Alex Ward had been briefed on a new mission. The Korak had built a massive orbital command ship, a behemoth known as the Harbinger, which was now coordinating their attacks on Earth from space. The Korak had placed an enormous network of communication relays across the globe, and the Harbinger was the central hub of it all. Destroying it would sever the Korak's coordination and provide humanity with a fighting chance to retaliate. It was the perfect target, but it was also the most heavily defended installation in the galaxy. "We hit them fast. We hit them hard," Ward said, his voice low and steely. "We don't have the luxury of making mistakes. This is our one shot." The Omega warriors, along with their growing resistance allies, planned an infiltration that would strike directly at the heart of Korak operations. They couldn't afford a prolonged assault. The mission was simple in theory: find a way aboard the Harbinger, disable its core systems, and bring it down. But as they looked at the ship's specifications, it was clear that even for them, this mission would push them to their absolute limits. Leela Kincaid, as always, was the first to voice her concerns. "We're talking about a ship that can wipe out entire continents with a single shot. If we don't disable its defense grid, we're all dead before we even get close." Ward nodded. "We know. That's why we're hitting them from the inside. There's a small transport shuttle docked in their lower hangar bay, likely for supplies. We take that in. Once we're inside, we split into teams. We destroy their internal systems, create chaos, and then get out." It was a dangerous plan, but it was the best they had. The Korak might have superior numbers and technology, but the Omega warriors had something more. They had surprise, and they had each other. With their augmented abilities, they could infiltrate and neutralize enemies before they even realized what was happening. Under the cover of darkness, the Omega warriors embarked on their mission. They moved swiftly through the ruins of Earth, making their way to a hidden spaceport. The shuttle they had commandeered was small but fast, designed for quick transport rather than heavy combat. They would have to be careful, as the Korak's patrol ships constantly scanned for any sign of enemy movement. But their mission was clear, and they couldn't afford to hesitate. As they approached the Korak fleet's outer defenses, tension hung in the air like a thick fog. The Omega warriors had faced countless battles, But this was different. They weren't fighting for survival. They were fighting for humanity's future. "Keep your heads down," Ward ordered, his voice steady. "We get in, we get out, and we hit them where it hurts." Leela's eyes were focused, scanning the starry void around them, as the shuttle's engines hummed quietly. The Korak fleet loomed ahead, a series of colossal warships that seemed almost to glow with ominous power. And there, in the heart of it all, was the Harbinger, its dark hull reflecting the stars like a predator waiting to strike. They approached undetected, the Omega warriors cloaked in the shuttle's stealth technology. When they docked with the ship, the silence was deafening. The hangar bay doors creaked open, and the team slipped out, their boots making barely a sound on the cold metal floor. It was a vast, dark space, filled with cargo and Korak technicians who worked tirelessly to maintain the fleet's operations. The Omega warriors didn't hesitate. They moved like shadows. Leela, with her sharp instincts and agility, took point, leading them toward the main control room. Ward and the rest of the team followed, eliminating any Korak personnel that stood in their way with precise, lethal force. They didn't kill for sport, but each Korak soldier who fell was a step closer to the success of the mission. As they reached the heart of the ship's command center, the Omega warriors planted explosives on critical systems, hacking into Korak communications and scrambling their signals. The Korak would no longer be able to call reinforcements. The mission was well underway, but Ward knew time was running out. The Korak would realize the breach soon enough. And when they did, the Omega warriors would need to be long gone. Package planted. "Time to go," Ward said, his voice urgent. They retreated through the ship's labyrinthine halls, their hearts pounding in their chests. The Korak would be coming for them, and they would have no mercy. But the Omega warriors were already one step ahead. They had caused the chaos they needed. Now it was time to disappear into the shadows. As the shuttle flew back toward the planet's surface, Ward glanced back at the distant shape of the Harbinger, now in turmoil. The Korak had no idea what had just happened, but they would soon learn. And when they did, they would know that humanity would never surrender. The explosion on the Harbinger was heard across the stars, a sudden flash of light that reverberated through the Korak fleet. The Omega warriors had succeeded. The Harbinger's communications and core systems were crippled, but their victory, though decisive, came with a price. The Korak weren't fools. They quickly realized the breach was not just a minor sabotage. It was a full-on assault, one that threatened to unravel their entire campaign. Back on Earth, the Omega warriors barely had time to catch their breath before the next wave hit. The Korak responded with terrifying speed, deploying their most elite shock troops to Earth's surface. The invasion had entered a new phase. This was no longer just a battle for survival. It was a battle for the very soul of humanity. In the days that followed, the Resistance saw an unexpected surge in strength. News of the Omega warriors' success had spread like wildfire, rallying Earth's fractured defenses. The global resistance forces, once disorganized and scattered, began to form a more cohesive front. Civilians took up arms, reclaiming small towns and villages, while military forces, reinvigorated by the warriors' audacious strike, mounted a series of counterattacks. But the Korak were relentless. They responded with orbital bombardments, wiping out entire cities in a single strike. The survivors scattered, hiding in bunkers or the wilderness. The Korak were no longer just invaders. They were executioners, their goal now to purge humanity from the planet once and for all. Captain Ward and his team had no illusions about the stakes. The victories they'd gained were temporary at best. The Korak would not let this act of defiance go unanswered. They would retaliate in full force, and in a war of attrition, humanity was running out of time. "We've hit them where it hurts, but this isn't over," Ward said, addressing his team in the briefing room beneath the remains of a collapsed military compound. "The Korak will escalate. They won't rest until we're wiped out. But we've seen that we can hurt them, and we can keep hurting them." Leela Kincaid stood by the tactical map, her expression grim. The map was dotted with Korak strongholds, their presence like a shadow across Earth's continents. The destruction was massive, but humanity had carved out pockets of resistance, areas where Korak control was weak. We need to keep the pressure up. We can't let them rebuild or regroup. We need a series of coordinated strikes, hard, fast, and relentless. Ward nodded. We'll take the fight to them. We hit their supply lines, their command centers. We force them to stretch thin. It won't stop the war, but it will buy us time. Just as they were about to plan their next moves, an alert flashed on the screen, an emergency transmission. It was from one of the few remaining military commanders who hadn't fallen to the Korak. General Isaac Harper, a seasoned veteran, was calling for a high-risk alliance. His message was simple. We've discovered something. It might change everything. But we need you here, Ward. This might be humanity's last hope. Ward's pulse quickened. The general's words echoed in his mind. Humanity's last hope. He knew the Korak were ruthless. But to hear those words now, in the midst of such brutal conflict, made him realize the full weight of what was at stake. The resistance was running out of options. We go, Ward said, voice determined. Leela, you and the others prepare the team. We meet Harper in 2 hours. If there's even the slightest chance this can turn the tide, we take it. The Omega warriors departed immediately, navigating the war-torn landscapes to reach General Harper's command center, located deep within an underground facility. The journey was perilous, filled with the remnants of Korak patrols and automated defenses that the warriors expertly evaded. They moved like shadows through the night, their enhanced vision and heightened senses allowing them to slip past dangers unnoticed. Upon arrival, Harper greeted them in person, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with a fierce determination. It's a weapon, a Korak weapon, hidden deep in their research outposts. We believe it can neutralize their most powerful forces, but it's heavily guarded by more than just Korak soldiers. Ward and his team exchanged looks. A weapon? One that can stop them? Leela asked, skepticism in her voice. Harper nodded gravely. Yes, but it's more than that. This isn't just about power. It's about their technology. If we can reverse engineer it, it could turn the tide of this war. But we need to strike now, before the Korak have the chance to move it again. Ward weighed the decision. This was their most dangerous mission yet, but it was their best chance for survival. We go. We'll get it, and we'll destroy whatever's left of their hold on Earth. The stakes had never been higher, but as the Omega warriors prepared for the next phase of their fight, they knew this mission wasn't just about reclaiming Earth. It was about saving humanity's future. And they would stop at nothing to ensure that Earth would never surrender. The Omega warriors stood on the precipice of a mission that would push them to the limits of their abilities. The weapon, hidden deep within Korak-controlled territory, could be the key to turning the tide of the war. But getting to it would mean infiltrating a well-defended Korak research outpost, where every inch of ground was held by the enemy's most elite forces. It was a nearly suicidal mission, but the fate of Earth rested in their hands. Captain Alex Ward, standing alongside his team in the dimly lit command room, knew the risks better than anyone. The weapon Harper spoke of was their only hope, a potentially game-changing technology hidden behind layers of defenses. But the Korak were always one step ahead, and their research outpost was heavily fortified. It wasn't just soldiers they'd have to face. This was a place where the Korak conducted their most secretive experiments, a place where the enemy pushed the boundaries of technology and biology. We know the terrain, Ward said, studying the map of the outpost. The facility is built into a mountain range on the outskirts of what was once the western United States. It's remote, heavily shielded. But we also know they're working with some kind of new weaponry inside. We've got to hit them hard, hit them fast, and get out before they realize what happened. Sergeant Leela Kincaid, always the pragmatic one, crossed her arms. We can't just storm in. The Korak aren't amateurs. We need a distraction, something to draw their forces away from the compound long enough for us to get inside. I agree, Ward said. We'll need a diversion, something big enough to pull their attention away from the base. We'll use the resistance cells to create chaos in the nearby cities. Force the Korak to divert resources to put down the uprising. The plan was set in motion. As War and his team prepared for the mission, they knew this would be a fight unlike any they had faced before. The Korak had grown desperate, and desperation made enemies dangerous. But the Omega warriors were ready. With their enhanced abilities and battle-hardened resolve, they were humanity's sharpest weapon. The journey to the research outpost was a perilous one. The Korak had established a perimeter of automated defenses, high-tech drones, surveillance satellites, and armed patrols. The Omega warriors had to rely on their training and stealth to avoid detection as they made their way across enemy lines. Every moment was a risk, but they had no choice. They had come too far to fail now. As they neared the outpost, the team split into two groups. Lila, Ward, and two others would infiltrate the facility itself, while the remaining Omega warriors created the diversion. The plan was simple: disable the security grid, locate the weapon, and then escape before reinforcements arrived. The clock was ticking, and every second counted. Inside the facility, the air was thick with tension. The corridors were eerily quiet, illuminated only by the cold glow of overhead lights. The Omega warriors moved silently, each step calculated and precise. They passed by locked doors, reinforced walls, and armed guards, their augmented abilities allowing them to avoid detection with ease. Ward's mind raced as they pushed forward. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for. "We're almost there," Leela whispered, her eyes scanning the hallway ahead. "There's a control room up ahead. If we can access their systems, we can disable the security and buy us some time." Ward nodded, motioning for the team to follow. The closer they got to the central research facility, the more intense the sense of danger grew. The Korak had invested too much into this place. The weapon they were after was their ultimate trump card, a tool that could bring humanity to its knees. As they reached the control room, Leela took point, her fingers flying across the console as she hacked into the facility's systems. The walls around them hummed with the sound of machinery, biological and technological experiments intertwined in a way that felt unnatural. The Korak's work was dark, twisted, and it was clear they weren't just building weapons. They were creating horrors. Ward's stomach turned as he glanced at a nearby containment chamber, where an alien creature, a hybrid of Korak and something else, moved within the confines of its cage. The Korak's experiments were worse than anyone could have imagined. Leela's voice broke through the tension. "I've got it. Security's down. We've got 5 minutes before the backup systems kick in. Let's move." Ward didn't hesitate. "Let's go." The team raced down the hall, their boots thundering on the cold floors as they pushed deeper into the facility. They reached the central lab, the heart of the Korak's research operations. Inside, the weapon was housed in a massive containment chamber, an object that pulsed with a strange alien energy. The Korak had kept it under lock and key for a reason. It was more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of their dominance over Earth, the final piece of their plan to crush humanity completely. As the team prepared to destroy the weapon, the alarms began to blare. The Korak had realized what was happening. Reinforcements were on the way. "Destroy it. Now," Ward shouted. Leela and the others set the charges while Ward stood watch, his weapon aimed at the door. The countdown began. As the seconds ticked away, the sound of Korak soldiers approaching grew louder. There was no turning back now. Earth's future depended on this one moment. The weapon detonated in a brilliant explosion, and the Omega warriors, their hearts racing, ran for the exit. The facility was collapsing around them, but there was no time to stop. And as the world outside erupted into chaos, one thing was certain: humanity would never surrender. Not as long as the Omega warriors still fought. The shockwave from the explosion reverberated through the Korak research facility as the Omega warriors dashed toward the exit, the walls shaking with the violent eruption. The weapon, no longer a threat, had been destroyed, but the cost of the operation was high. The Korak would not let this act of defiance go unanswered. As the facility crumbled behind them, the team raced toward their escape route, a narrow service tunnel leading to an underground bunker. Time was running out. The Korak would soon realize the full extent of the damage, and their retaliation would be swift and unforgiving. Ward's mind raced. The mission had been a success, at least for now, but the war was far from over. The Korak would be out for blood, and the Omega warriors had just dealt a serious blow to their most vital asset. But Ward knew that every victory came with a price. The Korak were ruthless, and their revenge would be catastrophic. "We're almost there," Leela said, her voice tight with urgency. She had her hand on her earpiece, tracking the team's progress and the incoming Korak forces. Ward nodded, his face grim. "Move fast. If we get caught in the open, we won't make it out alive." As they reached the end of the tunnel, a low rumble echoed in the distance. The Korak were mobilizing. Their reinforcements had arrived. The Omega warriors had to move fast. The team emerged from the tunnel into the surrounding wilderness, their breaths heavy and ragged from the exertion. The moonlight painted the landscape in a ghostly glow as the team sprinted toward their extraction point. But as they neared their rendezvous location, an unexpected force slammed into them, an ambush. The Korak had anticipated their escape. Elite shock troops, equipped with advanced weaponry and cloaking devices, emerged from the trees and rocks, surrounding the Omega warriors in a deadly trap. "We got company," Leela shouted, barely avoiding a plasma bolt that whizzed past her head. "They knew we'd be coming." Ward's mind raced. He had to think fast, or they would all die here. "Split up. We can't take them head on. Fall back to the forest line. We use the terrain to our advantage." The team scattered, moving like shadows through the dense underbrush. The Korak shock troops were fast, but they weren't as agile in the dense forest. Ward and his team knew this terrain better than the enemy. They'd trained for moments like this, when their backs were against the wall, and survival depended on using everything at their disposal. "Stay on comms," Ward ordered. "We move in small groups, hit them hard and fast. We take down their leader, and the rest will scatter." The forest erupted into chaos as the Omega warriors launched their counterattack. Ward's team moved through the trees, striking from unexpected angles, using their enhanced abilities to outmaneuver the Korak soldiers. Lila's team was the first to take out one of the enemy leaders, an officer who had been barking orders into his communicator. His death sent a ripple of confusion through the Korak forces. The remaining soldiers hesitated, unsure of their next move. "Keep pressing," Ward urged, his voice tight with adrenaline. "They're breaking. We need to take them all down." The Omega warriors fought with everything they had. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of Earth. The Korak may have been superior in numbers and technology, but the warriors had something the aliens couldn't replicate: the unbreakable will to protect their home. It didn't take long before the Korak troops began to fall back, retreating into the darkness of the forest. The Omega warriors had won this battle, but Ward knew it wouldn't be long before the Korak regrouped. They would come back stronger, more ruthless. This wasn't the end of the war. It was just another beginning. Panting and bruised but alive, the team regrouped at their extraction point. The sound of the incoming Korak reinforcements grew louder, and Ward knew they didn't have much time. The shuttle was waiting, but the escape wouldn't be easy. "Get to the shuttle, now," Ward shouted. "We've got to move before they regroup." With the Korak closing in, the Omega warriors sprinted toward the waiting transport. As they boarded, the shuttle's engines roared to life, lifting them off the ground and into the night sky. The mission had been a success, but the cost was high, and the battle was far from over. Ward stared out the shuttle's viewport as the Korak forces retreated into the distance. The war was far from won, but Earth was still standing. For now, that was enough. Mission accomplished, Leela said, breathless from the fight, her eyes meeting Ward's. Ward nodded, his face grim. This is just the beginning. The Korak will come for us again, but we'll be ready. As the shuttle soared into the sky, leaving the forest below, the Omega warriors knew that humanity's survival was hanging by a thread. But they had proven one thing. As long as they were alive, they would never surrender. Not now, not ever. The days following their escape from the Korak's ambush were a blur of movement and decision. Ward and his team were back at the Resistance's Central Command, a subterranean stronghold located beneath the ruins of a once thriving city. The shuttle had made it through the Korak blockade by the skin of their teeth, and now, in the dimly lit war room, the Omega warriors were debriefing with the few remaining leaders of Earth's shattered defense forces. Harper's team is analyzing the weapon data, Leela reported as she reviewed the intelligence they'd recovered. They're close to cracking it. If we can understand how the Korak weapon works, we might have a chance to neutralize the rest of their forces. But Captain Ward wasn't so sure. He had seen the full scale of the destruction the Korak were capable of. Earth's defenses were crumbling, and their resources were dwindling. The Korak had already infiltrated most major military bases, reducing humanity's counteroffensive to isolated skirmishes. Every day that passed seemed to stretch the thread of their survival thinner. I don't need to tell you that the Korak are coming for us, and they'll hit harder this time, Ward said, his voice heavy with the weight of the truth. But there's something more. We've hit their research facility, taken down their weapon. They'll want to retaliate, but it's not just about revenge. They're desperate now. Desperation makes them dangerous. Leela's gaze hardened. They've lost their leverage. We've hurt them more than they're letting on. We've hurt them, yes, Ward agreed. But they have far more to fight with than we do. And it's only a matter of time before they pull out something worse. At that moment, a transmission came through. A coded message from a previously unknown resistance cell deep within Korak-controlled territory. The message was brief but urgent. The Korak are preparing for something catastrophic. We've located a new weapon. It's not just for Earth, it's for the galaxy. The transmission ended abruptly. What did that mean? Leela asked, a chill running down her spine. Ward's mind raced. The implications of such a weapon, something not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy, were too immense to ignore. He turned to his team, a hard resolve setting into his expression. It means we're not just fighting for Earth anymore, Ward said, his voice low. We're fighting for the future of the entire galaxy. If they can deploy this weapon, no one is safe. Not just humanity. The room fell silent. The enormity of the situation was sinking in. The Korak had already demonstrated their ability to wipe out entire civilizations, but now, the stakes were beyond anything humanity had ever anticipated. How do we stop them? Leela asked, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed her growing concern. We strike first, Ward said, the decision coming to him with brutal clarity. We take the fight to their heart. We go for the source. If they have a weapon capable of destroying not just Earth, but entire systems, we need to destroy it before they launch it. The plan was audacious, but Ward knew that there was no alternative. The Korak were far too powerful to be taken down in a conventional battle. They would have to strike directly at the heart of the Korak Empire itself, cutting the head off the snake before the weapon could be deployed. In the coming hours, the Omega warriors prepped for the most dangerous mission of their lives. Their target, a Korak command stronghold located on a distant moon. Intelligence gathered from the resistance cell suggested that the weapon was being stored there, hidden within a heavily fortified research facility. This was no ordinary mission. It was a full-scale assault on the core of the Korak military. A single mistake could mean the end for humanity. Before they left, Ward gathered his team one last time in the briefing room. The weight of the task before them was palpable. They had already defied impossible odds, but this was different. This was their last shot at survival. "If we succeed, we can cripple the Korak Empire," Ward said, his voice unwavering. "But if we fail, they'll have the power to destroy us all. This is it. There's no turning back." The team nodded in solemn agreement. They had all lost too much to back down now. Earth's survival was hanging by a thread, but they would not surrender. They were the Omega Warriors, and they had never been more determined. The shuttle was ready for launch. They would face the heart of Korak power, and they would do whatever it took to stop the threat that loomed over the galaxy, no matter the cost. As the shuttle ascended from Earth's atmosphere, Ward looked out the viewport at the distant stars. The vastness of the universe seemed infinite, yet for the Omega Warriors, the fight for survival was concentrated into this one mission. The future of humanity and the galaxy depended on their success, and they would never surrender. The final assault on the Korak Command Stronghold was a mission like no other. Ward and his team were now on a transport shuttle bound for a moon located in the far reaches of Korak-controlled space. The journey was long, the silence in the shuttle deafening, each warrior deep in their own thoughts. They had faced insurmountable odds before, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The Korak weapon, which could annihilate entire systems, was somewhere inside the moon's heavily fortified complex. It had to be destroyed, or humanity's future was doomed. The team stood together in the briefing room, weapons strapped, minds focused. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Korak base, disable the weapon, and get out before the Korak's reinforcements could arrive. They knew the risks. There would be no second chances. As the shuttle descended toward the moon's surface, a cold, gray landscape spread out before them. The base was built into the rocky cliffs, its complex structure buried beneath layers of reinforced concrete and metal. It was a fortress, and Ward knew they had no room for error. The Korak had already been warned by the destruction of their research facility on Earth. They were waiting for the Omega Warriors. The shuttle touched down in a hidden valley near the base, far enough to avoid detection by Korak sensors. The team quickly disembarked, moving swiftly through the barren landscape toward their target. The wind howled around them, carrying the chill of the moon's surface. But there was no time for hesitation. They had come too far to turn back now. Inside the base, the air was sterile, the lights harsh and unwelcoming. The Omega Warriors had trained for this moment. Every movement was deliberate, every step taken with purpose. They encountered minimal resistance as they moved through the outer security checkpoints, but Ward knew that wouldn't last long. The Korak would be ready. As they approached the inner core of the base, where the weapon was believed to be stored, the atmosphere grew tense. The sound of distant footsteps echoed down the hallways, and Ward signaled for the team to spread out, taking positions to ambush the Korak guards. They waited in silence, weapons drawn, hearts pounding in anticipation. A Korak soldier appeared around the corner, his steps heavy and unhurried. As he passed, Leela moved swiftly, dispatching him with a single, silent strike. The team moved forward, their pace quickening. The mission was reaching its final phase. Soon, they would be face to face with the weapon, and with the Korak's true power. They reached the central chamber, a massive room with high ceilings and rows of flickering lights. In the center of the chamber stood the weapon, an enormous alien device, pulsating with a sickly green glow. It was unlike anything they had seen before, a mass of twisted technology, both biological and mechanical. Ward's stomach turned as he looked at it. This was the Korak's ultimate weapon, and it had to be stopped. "We need to disable it now," Ward said, his voice urgent. "Harper, get to work on the control systems. The rest of us will hold off the Korak." Harper moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the console as she worked to override the weapon systems. The rest of the team set up defensive positions, knowing it was only a matter of time before the Korak sent reinforcements. Ward kept his focus, every instinct on high alert. It wasn't long before the Korak came. First, a few soldiers, then a dozen. The Omega warriors engaged in a deadly firefight, their weapons blazing in the dim light of the chamber. The Korak were fierce, their alien strength the deadly match for the Omega warriors' skills. But the humans were relentless. They fought with the desperation of those who knew that failure meant the end. "We're running out of time," Harper shouted, her eyes darting between the controls and the incoming Korak. "I'll hold them off," Leela yelled, her voice fierce as she charged into the fray. The battle raged on, every corner of the chamber now a battlefield. Ward's pulse raced as he watched his team fight with everything they had. The Korak were relentless, but so were they. The odds were stacked against them, but Ward had always known that the Omega warriors were humanity's last hope. This fight was their final stand. "Done," Harper shouted as the control systems flickered and went dark. The weapon's green glow began to fade, and Ward felt a rush of relief. But there was no time to celebrate. The Korak forces were closing in, and the Omega warriors were running out of ammo and time. The base was on the verge of full lockdown, and the enemy reinforcements were already on their way. Ward made a split-second decision. "Fall back," he ordered. "We've done it. Now we get out of here." Now, the team, exhausted and bloodied, began to retreat, fighting their way back toward the shuttle. The Korak were everywhere, but the Omega warriors were faster, more determined. They had come to stop the weapon, and they had succeeded. As they boarded the shuttle, Ward's heart pounded with the exhilaration of victory, but there was no time to savor it. The Korak would rebuild. They would retaliate. But the Omega warriors had delivered humanity's strongest blow yet. As the shuttle soared away from the moon's surface, Ward looked out the window at the stars beyond. Humanity was not defeated. The Korak had been struck a critical blow, and they would never forget the name of those who had delivered it. The Omega warriors. And as long as the Omega warriors fought, Earth and the galaxy would never surrender.